Hello everyone, welcome to H.E.L.P, the free online lesson plan. Today we're going to talk about sustainability and culture, and specifically social sustainability. I'm Nicole Smith. I'm based in the United States. I am the founder of 𝙃.𝙀, which is an organization that helps museums focus on inclusive accessibility practices for people with disabilities. And I am also the co-director of social sustainability at 𝙃.𝙀, which is a non-for-profit that advocates for museums as spaces that benefit people, places, and the planet. I've worked in the museum field for 15 years, rather that be in a full-time staff capacity or a consultant. And in that time, I have helped museums navigate diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion work. I would just like to take a moment and thank 𝐼COM Italy, 𝐼COM Portugal, and 𝐼COM Czech Republic for allowing me to present and talk to all of you about social sustainability. So you may not be familiar with the term social sustainability, and if not, that's fine. But today we're going to talk about how we can leverage the role museums play in society to create a more equitable tomorrow. So social sustainability, for a definition, is an inclusive practice that fights for equity and everyone's voice to be heard. It requires us to actively seek out and listen to multiple perspectives, particularly those who are underrepresented or marginalized. Social sustainability advocates for there to be an inclusive society where everyone has a good quality of life and individuals can maximize their potential without jeopardizing such opportunities for future generations. Since we're talking about social sustainability under the guise of sustainability and culture, I just wanted to go over quickly the United Nations Sustainability Goals and pull out some of the sustainability goals that I truthfully believe social sustainability lies in. In the end of my presentation, I will have a list of resources. There is a wonderful guide of how each and every sustainability development goal can be enacted in museums, but for social sustainability and just that portion of sustainability, I really think that the following 8 hold through social sustainability, which is number 1, no poverty, number 4, quality of education, number 5, gender equality. Number 8, decent work and economic growth. Number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Number 10, reducing inequalities. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities. And number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. So again, in my resources, I will have a way of how you can go through all of these to really focus on sustainability in your institution and how it ties to museums. But today we're going to go over just social sustainability. So you may ask yourself why social sustainability is relevant to museums. Well, visitor expectations are changing, and to stay relevant, museums must too. This means addressing social and environmental issues, as well as recognizing that as a trusted public institution with the potential to inspire change, museums must support communities and build resilience. The process of becoming socially sustainable asks museums to be engaged and activists and work to create positive change in local communities and in a global society. So with that in mind, today we're going to go over 7 different fields and ways in how museums can practice social sustainability. This could be something that we talked about for an entire week. So what I really hope is all of the potential action items and ideas I have for these 7, you can enact a few, some of them, all of them, and also it may get you to think of things that you can do at your museum to be socially sustainable beyond this list I give you today. So to start out, we're going to talk about guest interactions. So how we can be socially sustainable in guest interactions is, first and foremost, emphasize that the guest interactions is part of everyone's job. Maybe at the museum you work at, your front of line staff, your guest service staff, your visitor experience staff, whatever terminology you use for that staff, has a uniform or something that is supposed to tell visitors that they are the visitor experience staff. But as you and I know, that a visitor just sees someone who maybe has a lanyard with a badge on it, has a name tag, and they're not in your guest services staff, they don't know the difference. They just see a staff member, and a staff member should be able to interact with every guest equitably and also be able to answer general questions like, where's the restroom? What time the museum is open? What time the museum closes? Where someone could get something to eat? And also, hopefully, what kind of exhibits you have on special right now. So yes, again, guest interactions, equitable interactions are a part of everyone's job. Something that I do and have led my staff to do is to be able to carry around paper and a pen or pencil with you to be able to communicate with someone who is deaf, someone who is nonverbal, or someone who your native language is their second, third, 12th language, and it may be easier for them to read and write rather than for them to speak the language. In the realm of someone coming to your museum that may not know the native language, gather staff data in your museum of what languages staff know, whether it be other verbal languages or signed languages, and keep that list readily available for your frontline staff that interacts with your public and visitors on a daily basis, in case someone comes in and your staff doesn't know their language, to be able to communicate with them, but you might have a staff somewhere else in the building that might be able to. Make sure that all staff can interact equitably with disabled visitors. Know where ramps, elevators, and accessible toilets are if you have those in your facilities. Give clear directions to galleries, bathroom, lecture halls, etc. Are there stairs? Which direction do you go? About how many steps maybe would it take to get there? I think a lot of the times, especially when asked for directions, if you're especially not in your guest services role and you're just maybe walking through the grand hall of your museum and someone stops you, it's usually, it's this way, we point with our hands. And that's not really equitable directions and easy directions to places. I like to, when I do staff trainings, tell people you're going to go behind you, you're going to go forward, you're going to go right, you're going to go left, then you're going to go X way, and there's going to be stairs up or down, or you're going to take the elevator up or down. Or if it's something that's very complicated, you're going to make a right here, and then at this landmark, you're going to make a left. At this landmark, you might take stairs or the elevator. Just make sure that you can give clear and precise directions of how to get through your institution. Another way to be socially sustainable is to, if you can, put pronouns on your staff name badges. First off, that lets your staffers be able to let everyone know that interacts with them what their pronouns are, which is always a positive because we want to make our staff feel included. But also it shows that you want to be inclusive of any gender that may come into your institution. So if someone sees that, they know that that's a welcoming place for someone who is, for anyone on any gender, even someone that chooses that they don't want to use something like a he, her, they, them pronoun, that they're still welcoming. And then right behind, I think the biggest thing I could have told you, which I made the first point, is emphasize that guest interaction is a part of everyone's job. The second biggest one I would say is learn what your own biases are and work to eliminate them. We live in an imperfect society. We live in a society that has bias. We have biases that were taught to us when we were kids, taught to us now as we are adults. If you don't know your own biases, you cannot work towards unraveling those biases and not having those biases anymore. So that is what I would suggest, all of these tips for how you can be socially sustainable with your guest interactions. The next way, or the next category of how we can be socially sustainable is in our programs and in our events. I want to say that in the time of COVID, I realized that a lot of programs, if you're still having them, are web-based. That will be later when we talk about web presence. Truthfully, right now, I'm talking about in-person programs, which, fingers crossed, we will be able to get to in the next year, year and a half, 2 years, and be then able to continue to do in-person programming if your institution cannot have in-person programming at the moment. For programs, in-person or virtual, keep in mind important dates for every community in your area, whether it be to celebrate with that community via a new program or a program that you've already done, and it's an annual program, or to not schedule large programs on those days so people have time to celebrate with their loved ones. I don't know where you're joining from. I hope all over, but as I said, I'm based in the United States. A lot of the days that we get off in the United States are based around either national holidays, which are historic dates, but also Christian-based holidays. Now, everyone in my country is not Christian, I can tell you that. So if we try to plan something and we don't have programs with this community, whether it be someone that celebrates a different religion or a community of refugees or immigrants from a different country, try to keep those dates in mind when you're planning programs. Another thing I can say is have an open dialogue with visitors and ask if anyone needs accessibility accommodations, whether that be someone who is deaf or hard of hearing and needs captioning or sign language, someone from the blind or low vision community that needs something in audio description, which is just a verbal way to describe an artifact or a play or a movie, or truthfully anything else. If someone, maybe you don't have enough seating to your visitors' liking, is there something that I doubt you're going to be able to change what seating looks like in an exhibit that's already existing, but be able to have that open dialogue to say, in this exhibit, we didn't have enough seating. In our next exhibit in this space, we can put more seating in, so we can be able to welcome people that might have a mobility disability or just someone that needs more breaks than usual. If you already have accessibility accommodations, really think of how visitors can request them. Is it something they automatically can do when they're registering for something, whether it be, a tour or a talk or a film or a play in your institution? Or is it something that they could easily find on your website? What is the process for someone from when they find out about the event for them to then be able to register and make sure that they can have an equitable experience? And if you already have accommodations, if you already know how easy or maybe not easy it is for people to request accommodations, how can we take out the burden of someone requesting those accommodations? Can we designate a few general public programs a month, a quarter, a year, if you don't have that great of a budget for it, to be able to say in your calendar that this program on this day will have audio description or captions or have someone that is a sign language interpreter So just like you and I would, if you don't have a disability that needs an accommodation like that, someone will be able to in the morning wake up and say, oh, my museum has this amazing lecture that's happening tonight and I can go. I don't have to call ahead in advance and say, I need a sign language interpreter as an example. So they have the equity and the freedom to interact with museums just like everyone else could. And then survey your city or town and see what the top languages are. Can you offer programming, either a one-off programming or a series, in the second most spoken language in your city or town? Now we're going to move on to exhibits, how we can make exhibits socially sustainable. So during the creation of your exhibits, try to make sure you are representing all voices in the story you are telling. I don't know what ages everyone is. I don't know if you were lucky enough to be able to go to institutions when you were younger. I am in my mid-30s. I definitely have been able to see the growth of institutions being able to tell everyone's stories on the top and making sure that everyone is represented. I feel that when I was a child and I would go to a history museum or an art museum or a science center or a natural history museum, depending on the topic, it was really talked about in the lens of white cis men. It didn't really bring in a female voice, and it didn't bring in anyone from the LGBTQ community, and it definitely didn't bring in anyone that was a person of color in the United States in these stories. I know that can be a daunting task to make sure that everyone is represented, but if it's something that you're noticing in your institution that either you and your colleagues are noticing or your visitors have been saying to you, you don't have to do everything in all one exhibit. You can just start out slow and try to build those voices slowly but surely throughout all of your new exhibits. Say for this next exhibit, we're going to include this voice that we have not included that much in the past. And for our next exhibit after that, we're going to try to include that voice plus another one. It's just about being able to build everything. You're not going to go from not representing everyone to representing everyone in your next exhibit. It takes time. Another thing you could do in your exhibits to make it more socially sustainable is try to write for 12-year-old reading level or lower when writing labels and exhibits. You want to make sure that adults and children can come and have a great experience, but you also want to make sure that if anyone comes that isn't a native speaker of your language, maybe they do know that language, but it's not their second, third, or fourth. If you write it at a lower reading level, that ensures that more people will be able to understand it and be able to interact with it. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is, at museums, we produce such amazing work. We want to make sure that as many people as possible can interact with it. Now, the next thing I would say, and I don't know the topics of your museums, of the people that are watching this, I don't know if this has ever happened to you or could happen to your institution, but have warning labels on images, videos, or sounds in exhibits that may contain triggering content for every group in your community. An example that I like to use for this action item is if you have a very interactive exhibit that has potentially sound or video and images that deals with some conflict or some war. There are a lot of veterans that do go to institutions, but there is a lot of veterans that have post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and your exhibit might be triggering to them, which if they don't know to prepare for that, they might have to leave in the middle of the exhibit because they didn't know that they were going to potentially that your exhibit was potentially going to evoke a negative feeling for them that they cannot process while in your institution. Make sure that the height of your case and labels are at a level where children, adults, and anyone using a mobility device can read about or see objects. In the resources at the end, there's a really great resource that the Smithsonian institutions created for accessible exhibits that has heights, that has widths of aisles. But again, going back to, we do amazing work. We want to make sure everyone can interact with it. If something is too high and a child or someone that is using a mobility device, I'll use a wheelchair, for example, if it's too high and they can't look at or look into something, then that exhibit primarily doesn't exist in your exhibit because not everyone can interact with it. If you have any videos or audio in your exhibits, whether it be a video with audio or something like an oral history, try to create captions if it's a video, or try to have a transcript if it's just audio, or if you can't put captions in a video, especially if it's, you know, an art piece that the artist created and it doesn't have captions in it. You can't go in their art piece and create captions in it, so you might have to do a transcription. Just to make sure anyone who has who's deaf or hard of hearing can be able to get that richness of that story or the audio in a video. And then the last thing in exhibits to make them socially sustainable is to incorporate touchables into your exhibits. My background is in accessibility. So I think a lot of people, when they hear me talk about touchables, only thinks about the disability community, which is very important to have touchables in your exhibit, whether it be something like something in your exhibit or something that's truly just scaled down from something in your exhibit for someone to be able to touch. But it's also a really great way for children to be able to interact with your exhibit. The next thing we're going to talk about is outreach and marketing, of how we can make that socially sustainable. If you want to work with a new community, or you're trying to work with a new community, are there service organizations for that community that you can partner with and create a relationship? If you've never created, or if you've never had programming or anything in your exhibit for a specific community, in the history of your museum being a museum, that community is not going to immediately look for you to hope that you create programming or something in your exhibits for that community. They have tried to interact with your institution or heard through word of mouth that your institution doesn't have anything for that community, so that community won't be paying attention. So you need to have a stopgap. You need to be able to reach out and build a relationship with a service organization that maybe focuses on that community to get the word out through that, or that service organization, to that new community for you. In that vein of reaching out to an stopgap organization to help you to create a relationship is to potentially create a simple marketing guide that you could send out to community partners, that you have written up offerings for new things that you're doing in your exhibits or programs for your growing communities. An example is potentially, let's say I'm going to defer to the disability community, but let's say that you have new tours that focus on leading a tour in your sign language of the language in your country, and you don't have that many patrons already, visitors already who are deaf and hard of hearing, but you know there's a large community in your city or town. You can type up something as large as something to put in a newsletter, or short as to maybe be a tweet or a Facebook post or Instagram post, and create it all in a marketing guide to say, hi, service organization, this is what we're doing. We really want to grow this community. We're really excited about being able to offer these new offerings in our institution. Can you help us spread the word? So then the onus isn't on that organization to write up something. They can just cut and paste things that your organization, your museum has already written. You may not think that work, but in my experience, it has worked because you're just asking someone to promote a program or an exhibit. It's, you know, a new fun thing for their community to be able to engage with. Now, those are ways of reaching out to communities that you may not know, may not have relationships with, but a good way to potentially use your already visitorship, your already base of your museum to be able to spread the word for you is to talk about new community relationships or new offerings in your institution for communities in your member magazine or your member newsletter or a member blog if you have one, to be able to tell your members what you're doing. And then they obviously already love your institution because they're members. By word of mouth, they may know someone in that community that will be able to engage with your museum further. Or create a pamphlet that you could put like where you have your maps at in your institution. Granted, this is probably a not post-COVID because it will never be a post-COVID, but once COVID gets better, be able to be something that you can actually pick up and take with you. Have a pamphlet or a rack card or whatever you would call just a cardstock, probably a foot tall, that has on one side information about your general hours of your institution, how they can contact your museum, but then the other for maybe the next month or the next quarter of the year, programs or exhibits that have new features or new programs for that specific community, where that community that's growing may not be inside your institution, but a friend of someone in that community might, and the friend could be there or the family member, pick that up, take that with them, and then give that to that person the next time they see them, be like, did you know that X museum is doing this kind of programming? I think you would really enjoy it. So it's an easy way to spread word of mouth of new developing features or programs at your institution. If you have a calendar that is in print or virtual, and you know that there are programs where you're going to have embedded accessibility accommodations, or you're going to have programming in different languages, or you're going to have programming that focuses on a certain type of community, mark those in your calendar, whether you put them all together on a certain page or you have a symbol that you denote in your calendar for that, just so that's another thing that people could pick up or go to online to be able to see, oh, I know they have this program. I wonder if they have any more programs like it that a new visitor of their institution, can go to because I like the new community work they're doing. And then I know that many institutions have multiple email lists for, let's say, school groups, adult programs, new exhibits, something else, to where it might be a lot of work on the back end if you don't have a newsletter, but also it might be super easy if you already have 5 newsletters going out quarterly or monthly. Maybe if you see an uptick in people from the new community that you're trying to engage with, ask if they would want to sign up for a newsletter that you could send out monthly or quarterly, just to make sure that they are well informed of what you're doing with their community so they can come back to your institution and have a great time. Now we're going to talk about how we can make our physical museum, our buildings, more socially sustainable. Diversify your museum's wayfinding. Can you have your wayfinding in multiple forms, whether it be a large print map, signage, and simple language, which simple language is just another way to say a reading level of 12 or below, or have your wayfinding in a different language, and use universal symbols for things like toilets or elevators or an accessibility ramp. Take a look at who's using your signage and who's not. Even by signage, we sometimes find people asking questions that at this sign that's right next to us. they could be getting that information. So maybe there's a barrier that we don't know about, why they can't get the information from our wayfinding. Another way we could make our buildings more socially sustainable is to create a space for parents to breastfeed their children. If you don't have a space and don't think people are feeding their children, I can guarantee that either someone is outside of your institution doing that, or someone is in a bathroom who is breastfeeding their child. I understand that in every institution, there's always a fight for space. There's a fight for office space. There's a fight for making office and staff space public space, and vice versa, to where it might be hard to be able to create a space for parents to breastfeed. But that's just about creating a comfort level with people, not having them either feed their child while they're in a bathroom, or forcing them to go outside of your institution and come back in. Another great way to make sure your actual physical building is more socially sustainable is to try to have a few non-gendered toilet bathroom options. At museums I've worked at before, we do have men's, we do have women's, but we also have a third bathroom that is the accessible bathroom, the all-family bathroom, and the non-gender bathroom. You can definitely put them all together, or you could specifically have just non-gender bathrooms without them also being those two other types of bathroom. If your museum does not have ramps, elevators, or accessible toilets, make sure to add those features if you ever do a renovation or build a new building. I know when it comes to physical spaces of creating accessibility features, it often gets overlooked, but it's something that we can all think about and add to our institutions. And then the last thing you can do in the realm of your physical building is kind of web presence, but I want to talk about here in our physical space is create a social story or a social narrative. If those terms are brand new to you, which I'm going to assume of everything I talk about, that's going to be a term that most people are unfamiliar with. But a social story or a social narrative is a document with short, easy to read descriptions of a particular situation, event, or activity, which includes specific information about what to expect in that situation and why. Think of, some people have never been to museums and they don't know how to quote unquote do a museum. I will say that social stories and social narratives the idea specifically came to be more welcoming to people who are on the autism spectrum and people who are neurodiverse that may want that knowledge of how to plan to go into a space and how to interact with that space. But it's a really good tool beyond being able to welcome the autism community, to be able to welcome kids or potentially even adults who have never been to a museum, for them to know where to go, if they need to get tickets, what time your institution is closed, if truthfully any easy, quick information they could possibly need is in like one document, which is your social narrative or your social story. Okay, so now we're going to talk about web presence and how we can be socially sustainable in our institution's web presence. Make sure your website is user-friendly. Survey staff. Your staff is really your best tool on to figure out if everyone thinks something is easy to use, but see how your staff use your own museum site. See if they have trouble. And if your staff has trouble with some things on the website or where they need to find things, then definitely your visitors are gonna have an issue finding information on your website. Have free access to all information on your website. Remove paywalls. I don't I don't know that many institutions that have paywalls for certain information, but if you do, really think, especially in the time of COVID, the cost benefit of having those paywalls and how many people you're potentially leaving behind and not letting them access your institution's information. Create a social sustainability statement. And again, social sustainability is just another term that's a little shorter for diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. It's really welcoming to have on a website for someone to go to and see that an institution may not have all of the answers. It's definitely not going to be perfect when it comes to diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion, but to be able to have a social sustainability statement that says that you are trying to be a better institution is a really great way to let visitors know that you're trying to make them feel more welcome in your institution. Make sure your website and social media is accessible for people with disabilities. Alt text, color contrast, font choice, reading level. In the resources, there are some resources that talk about how to make things in the web more accessible. I added social media in there because I don't know if in the time of COVID, because there hasn't been, it's such a recent thing that there hasn't been studies, but in the time before COVID, there were studies that people go to institution social media before they go to their website. So if your social media is accessible, then why would someone continue to your website to try to find information if they can't already get the information off your social media? And then the last thing I can say about how to make your museum's web presence socially sustainable is a big one. And I hope that your institution has this in the plan, in the works if they don't already have it, but create a searchable online collection and make sure it's accessible to people with disabilities and non-native language speakers. I think in the time of COVID, we've all seen hopefully upticks in our online collections if we have it on our website, if we have our online collections. And it's been a really great way for people at home to engage with museums that unfortunately had to close their doors. And then the last and final way we can be socially sustainable in museums is through employment. So just a few things. When we're writing job descriptions to be able to send out for exciting openings at your institution, remove all biased language from job descriptions, whether that means biased language towards gender, age, disability, members of the LGBTQ+ community. There is something in the resource that talks about biased language and how you can remove that. But it's shown that people who are women and people who are non-binary, older adults, people with disabilities, people of color, and people in the LGBTQ communities often are underrepresented in the museum field and often are less likely to apply for positions. Going on that of underrepresented communities in our museum field is try to post openings in non-traditional spaces. If you have any community partners, ask if they have a resource on which they post jobs. And if they do, send the job link or just a PDF of the job description to your community partners for them to get the word out. I feel that we're so lucky to work in museums and that we get to really educate the world every day on things that we find important. And for people that come to our institution that are already engaged, what a gift to be able to say, we know you love our institution, will you come and work with us to make our museum that much richer? And then make sure your hiring process is accessible to people with disabilities. There's a resource in my resources that talks about how to make your either web portals or your interviews more accessible to people with disabilities. And then for people that already work at your institution, Re-examine your human resource policies and see if there are any biases in leave policies, holidays you get off, dress codes, etc. Um, I feel like in every institution, there are definitely small or large biases in what we ask of our employees. And we cannot change that until we re-examine the policies that we put forth for our employees. Um, the next thing is pay people a fair and equitable salary free from bias. Um, Throughout every field, and not just in museums, there's a huge gender gap in women getting paid, women and people who are non-binary getting paid much lower salaries than our male counterparts. And then when you add things such as race and disability into that, the numbers go even lower of um, potential women of color or people with disabilities of color or people with disabilities who are women get paid so much less than just women and or white women in the museum space. Um, Again, I don't know from what country you're seeing this. I feel that um, unpaid internships is a very American thing of when I've been doing research on unpaid internships. It's definitely something that I'm very passionate about to end, because if you don't pay your interns, then you're only being able to really bring on a select type of person that can work sometimes 40 hours a week or more for free for your institution. But if you're watching this from outside the United States and you have a unpaid internship program, really think of what type of person can work for you for free and what kinds of people may not be able to work for you for free, and work towards ending unpaid internships. So on that note, we're done with the things I said. Again, um, those are just scratching the surface of what museums can do to be social sustainability. But I want to leave you with social sustainability is every staff member's responsibility, whether you are an intern or a part-time employee or the president of your institution. I hope that the very short list of the things I was able to present in this time period made you think of hopefully some things in those lists that you can enact, or maybe your museum is the most the most socially sustainable museum in the world. And I hope to be able to visit your museum one day and you're already doing everything on those lists. Maybe you can move beyond that list and think of some great ways to build social sustainability into your institution. Here is my page 1 of resources. I will pause for a moment so you don't have to pause the video, so you are able to look at these. And then here is the second page of references and resources for you to look at to help you build social sustainability into your institution. And then thank you so much for your time for watching this. I really appreciate. I obviously love talking about social sustainability. If we go all the way back to the UN Sustainability Development Goals, the last goal is talking about how to create partnerships and how to spread the word of the UN Sustainability Development Goals. So by me being able to present and you watching this, we have already done one of the Sustainability Development Goals. So again, thank you so much for watching. Again, thank you so much to 𝐼COM Italy, 𝐼COM Portugal, and 𝐼COM Czech Republic for letting me present. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much.